So Scythe has been around making pretty compelling CPU coolers for quite some time now. And in front of us today, we have their Big Shuriken 3, a low profile CPU cooler that aims to provide solid performance without a massive footprint. Let's check it out. What's going on, guys? I'm Brian, and today we're taking a look at the Big Shuriken 3 from Scythe. As always, I will be leaving links to everything we talk about today in the description box below. The Big Shuriken 3 comes in at $49.99, and in the box you will find the CPU cooler, the installation guide, some thermal paste, as well as mounting hardware for both Intel and AMD motherboards. The cooler has a low profile design with a pretty nice looking gray and black aesthetic. It has this nice metal wrapping around the top of the heatsink, and for me this is a super nice touch because I'm not a big fan of the just, plain old silver heatsinks. The build quality of this cooler is absolutely solid, and as of right now, I have absolutely no complaints on that at all. Everything that also comes with this guy also feels really nice, and it's well built. As for the dimensions, the cooler comes in at 69 millimeters tall, 122 millimeters wide, and 122 millimeters in depth. And this is, of course, with the included fan attached. Now, they also do include screws to use standard sized 120 millimeter fans if you want to go that route. And in that scenario, the cooler would then be about 77 millimeters tall. Since this is a low profile CPU cooler, you are probably going to be putting it into a small form factor case. And so I highly recommend confirming that it will fit the case you plan on putting it in. This is not going to fit in super small ITX cases like the Dan A4. It will, on the other hand, be fine with a case like the Cougar QBX or the N-Case M1. The cooler has 5 heat pipes attached to its nickel-coated copper cold plate. Wow, try to say that 5 times fast. And they are slightly sloped backwards so that the fin array is not centered over that cold plate. That, along with a cutout in the fin array, allows for essentially unlimited clearance for your memory, as well as up to 26 millimeters of clearance for larger VRM heatsinks. You really shouldn't have any problems getting this to fit most motherboards, but in the event that you actually do have an issue, you can always use memory kits with a low profile heat spreader and then flip the cooler 180 degrees, which you might want to do anyway, since some ITX cases like the Cougar QBX have small exhaust fans in the back that this cooler will certainly interfere with. Socket compatibility is pretty solid with this guy, as it can be mounted to nearly every recent socket for Intel and AMD besides the Threadripper lineup. I'll be sure to leave a link to the product page down below so you can verify that the socket that you have will work with this CPU cooler. And installation is pretty straightforward too. Now, I only have an AM4 socket, so I'll show you guys how to install it on there, but I'll also talk you through on how to do it on the mainstream Intel platforms as well. If you have an enthusiast grade Intel chip, you'll have to open up the manual, but the process is really easy. In fact, you probably don't even need me to be showing you how to install it, but I'm just doing it just to give you guys, some guidance. So the first thing you will want to do is grab the back plate that you're going to need for your motherboard. This is going to be the AMD one, and this is the one that you're going to use for Intel. Now, you should have received the AMD one with your motherboard. It does not come with the Big Shuriken 3. The Intel one, on the other hand, it does come with the Big Shuriken 3. Once you have that in hand, go ahead and align it with the holes next to your sockets and push it up against your motherboards like this. Grab these little spacers and slide them onto the screw holes if you have an AMD motherboard, or screws if you have an Intel motherboard. These spacers will only fit on one way with the padding upward, and they apply just enough pressure to basically hold the backplate in place while you get the retainers attached. The AMD retainers are the longer ones, and you will screw them into the backplate with these screws. Make sure that the groove is upward and the brackets are attached parallel to your RAM slots. For Intel, the brackets will also be parallel to your RAM slots, but you will screw in the nuts instead of screwing in the AMD related ones. Once you have the retainers down nice and tight, go ahead and remove the fan from your cooler by unscrewing these 4 screws. You then want to add a pea-sized drop of thermal paste, or like a thermal pad like the one I'll be using here today, to your CPU and remove the plastic cover from the bottom of the Big Shuriken Shuriken 3. Now go ahead and position the big Shuriken 3 so that the screws on the cooler line up with the screw holes on the retainers. Get both screws started and then go back and forth between each screw until the cooler is firmly attached to the retainers. The Scythe logo should be facing towards the bottom of the motherboard unless you opted to have the cutout in the fin array over the memory slots instead of the VRM heatsink. Finally, reattach the fan and plug it into the motherboard CPU fan header. The process is really straightforward and really easy to do. I will say try to have a skinny screwdriver if you can, because the opening in the fin array for these screws isn't all that large. I actually accidentally bent a couple fins while attaching and removing my cooler for this video. All right, so the fan is also pretty quiet for the most part. I had to set the fan speed to 85% to get it noise normalized to 40 decibels, and that's with my noise floor at just about 30 decibels. Now, to give you guys an idea of how loud it gets when it ramps up, as well as to aid you in setting up your fan curves, here is a quick noise test that shows you what it sounds like at every 10% mark from 30% to 100% fan speed. So what do you think? What I found to be really nice about this cooler's fan is that even while at 100% fan speed, the noise emitted is pretty tolerable. The fan does not have like that annoying high-pitched coil whine like sound some fans have, and just for numbers sake, at 100% fan speed, the cooler's fan only produces a noise level of 44 decibels. This of course is with a noise floor of 30 decibels. Comparing that to the other coolers I've tested, and you're basically falling right in the middle of the pack. Not too shabby. As for cooling, this guy does pretty solid, especially for being a low profile cooler. I did all my testing using these IC graphite thermal pads and a 1600 AF clocked at 4 gigahertz at 1.2 volts. Now, if you watched my previous cooler review, you would know I actually tested both the 1600 AF and the 3700X. Seeing as the spread from cooler to cooler between the two CPUs was about the same, I decided testing just the 1600 AF would give us plenty of information on where it stacks up with the other coolers I've reviewed. So I ran AIDA64's default stress test until I reached steady state with the fan set at the default fan curve, as well as noise normalized to 40 decibels. Again, my noise floor is 30 decibels. And for those of you who are curious, the fan speed for the noise normalized test is 85%, or about 1560 RPM. Lastly, before we get into the results, I also did some gaming to see kind of where the temperatures would fall for that too. And with all of that said, here's what we got. So this cooler is a pretty solid option if you need a low profile cooler. The big thing here is that it's only slightly worse than the Deepcool Gamix GT, which is a much larger size, budget friendly single tower cooler. On top of that, the Big Shuriken 3 essentially produces the same amount of noise as the Gamix GT as well. And this isn't a comparison between the two, but it's just crazy to see that a low profile cooler like the Big Shuriken 3, that it competes with a much larger option. And of course, at not too much of a premium either, which you would typically see in these kind of specialized products. And so I think if you are putting together a small form factor build and can fit this cooler into your case, it should probably be at the top of your list. It's small and compact, easy to install, and it performs really, really well. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more tech content just like this. If you want to see more CPU cooler reviews, check out my review playlists right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.